Thanks, Jude. And can everybody hear? Is this working? What a great looking audience. Here for Matt. Well done.
You sound surprised.
No, I'm delighted. There's 3 chairs up front if anybody in the back wants. No? Oh, well, thank you all for coming. I'm really happy to do this. Matt is my colleague. I led the search committee that hired him. So I feel a certain connection, not just to the fact that I love this book. This novel, North Country, is my favorite kind of book, a literary thriller. It has a great plot. It has incredible characters, including my favorite character in recent fiction, Sebastian.
Okay.
Matt will tell you about him. It has amazing setting. I don't know how, I'll ask Matt about the setting later, but the North Country setting against 2 Canadian borders up in high New York, it's just beautiful. So I'm really pleased for Matt and this book. And I guess my first question for him, and I'll have questions from y'all in a bit, would be, where did this novel come from? Talk about the germ of it.
Yeah. Thanks, Tom.
And perhaps describe it a little bit as well.
I will. Thanks for that. And before I begin, I want to thank everybody for coming, and graduate students, undergraduate students, Marina, awesome, friends, family, my wife Stacy, everybody's here. Oh, more undergraduate students here in front. This is fantastic. I'm honored and flattered that you all are here, and I'm especially honored that Tom Franklin is doing this with me. One short anecdote, some of you have heard this before, but when I was a graduate student at Florida State University, Tom Franklin came to do a reading for his first book, and it was brilliant. You know, we all loved this book, and I met him, he signed my book, and I remember that night, I was like, I want to be like Tom Franklin. This is who I wanted to be like. And when I had an opportunity to get a job here, I took it because I wanted to work with Tom Franklin. I wanted to be with Tom Franklin. And I've been here 10 years now, and it's been glorious. So thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom. An inspiration for me. And so it was really nice to be able to ask him to do it. I felt I was in a good position to ask him to do it, and at this point,
he asked me in City Grocery after I'd had about 11 beers.
Yeah, well, that was part of the plan.
And yeah. I don't do this well. So
yeah, I know.
This is my first one to do, actually. So.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Okay, great. Well, thanks so much. I'm honored that you're here doing this with me. So yeah, the book North Country. North Country refers to a specific region in northern New York. Not western New York, not Buffalo side, but like the northeastern corner, Lake Champlain, on the border of Quebec. I worked at the State University of New York, Plattsburgh for 2 years. It was my first tenure track job that I got. I got out of grad school. I worked at George Mason a couple years, and so I got this job. And my wife and I, we moved up to northern New York in this little town on the shores of Lake Champlain, right by the border, not really knowing what we were getting into or anything else. And really, the environment and the locations and the place and the people, it quickly kind of captured my attention. All of my work that I've ever done has always features difficult environments. I'm fascinated by geography, weather, just the conditions that people live in and how that affects culture and everything else. And so I was, born and raised outside of DC in Virginia, spent all my time in the South. This was my first foray to the deep North. And so, I was very intrigued by it. And what I found was really kind of an amazing cultural place. It was, people there were so immediately welcoming and brought Stacy and I into their homes, wanted to engage with us. People in that part of New York also are very, in contrast to here, they're very forthright and direct. They will tell you exactly what they're thinking about what's going on. It was just sort of kind of an interesting attitude that was particularly kind of interesting to me. But I became interested in how people live in this environment. Now, the weather up there and things is nothing to be trifled with. I mean, there was one winter where it was -10 for more than a week, and it never got above -10. Rain, ice, snow, all that stuff. Winter's 8 months long, and then of course the summers are this glorious, beautiful summer. It's 75 degrees. It's fantastic. I highly recommend it as a summer destination. But the winters were hard, and people retreat into their homes. They get into their basement bars, their garage beer fridges, all this kind of stuff, and snowmobiling, sledding, winter sports take over. And it was just a really fascinating culture for me. And so I wanted to somehow deal with that or talk about that. But also I was really fascinated by the Lake Champlain. One of the biggest freshwater lakes in North America and in the world, and one of the deepest too. It's 800 feet in some places. I was able to spend a lot of time on it, sailing and doing things and swimming. As Tom said, I do a lot of open water swimming. So to swim across a lake like that, Lake Champlain, a freshwater body, that's these massive depths. I love that kind of scale, like these large scale things. So I was really fascinated. And then it freezes over in the winter, and people are driving their trucks out at ice fishing and all that. And I was able to participate in some of that, and I found that really kind of intriguing. And so I wanted to write a story about these people in this place, more than anything else. And then really, you're thinking about a place, you're thinking about how you want to write about it, and then something happens. Usually, for me at least, there's some kind of catalyst, some kind of idea. And for me, it was when I was doing some preliminary research on it, just kind of searching around, and I found out that most, like 75 to 80% of the MDMA or ecstasy in the United States comes across the Canadian border, the Quebec border in particular, in the Northeast. I had no idea. I just assumed it was probably either coming from the southern border or otherwise. I didn't know this. And that often this MDMA is transported on things like ultralight aircraft or snowmobiles through the woods or across the frozen lake in the middle of the night, things like that. And so you can have a backpack with $5 million worth of ecstasy, one person, and they call them screamers. It goes screaming across the ice in the middle of the night. It's an incredible, not just an incredible sort of payday for the people who do it, but it just seems incredibly exciting and interesting to me. And I wanted to get into how that could happen. How do you get across the border? What are the considerations you have to worry about? Surveillance, obviously the war on drugs. The United States is not just letting this happen. The United States is out there with its border patrol, satellite imagery, drones, all kinds of things, trying to stop this, and yet it still gets through. And so I became intrigued with that kind of plot aspect of it. And then the characters, kind of emerged, and most of my books, all of my books really are essentially built on the structure of Winesburg, Ohio, the great novel by Sherwood Anderson. If you don't know Sherwood Anderson, Winesburg, Ohio, you should all read it because it's really the foundation. My thesis is the foundation of American literature in the 20th century in general, fiction-wise. He's the person that taught Faulkner and Hemingway how to write, so there's that. But the structure of it and the way that he positions these different people, it reminds me of that classic line about living lives of quiet desperation. People living in a small town, but that have big, important interior lives. I wanted to get into that, so it was an exploration, and I spent 12 years writing this book, actually, and it took a long time.
12 years.
Yeah. Well, there was an earlier version. I spent like 4 years doing it, and this is for all the writers out there. This is stuff that's important to know. I spent 4 years doing it, and then my agent, we took it out. Nobody wanted it. It looked dead. It was just nothing. Nobody wanted anything to do with it, and I regrouped, and I wrote a book called Oleander City, the last book I published, which is about Galveston hurricane and all different stuff. But this was always in the background. And then, I fixed it, I think. I got back into it and reworked it, revised it, a ton. But this is definitely the longest thing that I've ever worked on. The most time I've ever spent with a series of characters or anything else is this book. So
I'm not surprised there's so much in it. There's great satellite imagery, great technical stuff in here. There's art in here. There's an art collector, Donnie Leclerc, who's an amazing character. He's very funny.
Yeah.
Talk about these characters. Who was the first character? There's a guy called Tom Kaiser who's back from the war where something bad happened. There's 2 years unaccounted for. So did he start the book?
Yeah, pretty much. I was thinking about it's based in part on a gentleman I once knew, but I'm going to read a scene. There's a tragedy, or there's an early tragedy on the ice, and I had that scene early on, and I had an idea about this person growing up, and then I was also really fascinated by. I'm really fascinated by certain things, certain aspects of technology, and certainly satellites to me are amazing, and I'm just intrigued by them, and I don't know, and so I was thinking, what if somebody could locate. Because I'm always interested in. I'd like to see them. They're hard to see. It's hard, What if somebody could intuitively do that? They knew where satellites were. It's almost like a kind of a slightly supernatural, strange thing he has. What would bring that on? Like, how would he have that ability? And then if you had that ability, what would you do with it? Where would you go? So this is a guy that's fascinated by really like astrophysics, like the laws of physics on a high level. So he enters the 9/11 happens, and he's in the military, and he gets fast tracked into this air combat controller thing, which was new at the time back in the 9/11 days, but Air Force special forces guys who work to communicate with air power and to set up bombing and other kinds of air power things. This was their specialty, and so it just seemed like, well, that would be perfect for him. He would be really good at it. He'd be automatically good. And then what if he came back to New York, this little town with very little going on, nothing else happening, etc. But there's this drug thing. So how could I get him involved in that? Because he would naturally have the perfect skill set to be able to make this happen. He knows where the satellites are. He can find them, he can track them, and so he can find a blank space on the border that you could move large amounts of. So it's this sort of a speculative idea about somebody that has an extra ability, maybe, combined with, and he's kind of a classic noirish character in a way. He's kind of a hard-nosed guy. He's not very good at expressing how he feels and things. But because there's this tragedy in his youth as well. But yeah, he was the first one. But all the other characters really, and there's 5 perspectives in this book. So it's unusual in that regard, and they all kind of emerged. There's a university professor, which has nothing to do with any of the university professors I've ever worked with. Certainly, no doubt.
But she looks just like Karen Raber.
No, it's
Sorry,
not true.
Karen.
That's not true. It's an art history professor, and okay. So I was obsessed with the paintings of J.M.W. Turner, 19th century British artist Turner. If you all know Turner. You've seen his paintings before. If we showed you one, you would know it. And so I'm obsessed with these paintings, and I was. Art history, if I was not an English professor, that would be the thing I would want to. And so I was like, well, what if there was a guy that was into that? Because one of the things that interests me about the North Country is light, in the lack of. My wife, her chief complaint was it's so dark. It's dark and overcast and raining and snowing, and there's not much sunlight except for maybe 2 months in the summer. And so somebody that was obsessed with light, and of course Turner's most famous paintings are these Mediterranean seascapes with just bright white light splashed everywhere. What would it be like to live in that area and to be teaching this and to be longing for that, to be trapped in a way, all those kinds of things. And so there's a bit of an academic, and then there's a student, as well. So there's some academic stuff. So which is my first foray into that. I've never written about academic students or college professors or anything like that. So there was fun doing that. But I also, hockey is also a huge deal up there. And who are the most interesting hockey players on the team? Well, it's clearly the defenders, let's call them, the goons. Come on, hockey's the only sport that has people on the team that are just there to beat other people up. I mean, like, yeah, exactly, yeah, I love it. Like, what would that be like to be that guy? Because you think you're good. He's played a lot of hockey. You play a lot of hockey. I'm a skilled player, but then they say, yeah, that's great and all, but we want you to punch these guys out and get them out of the game. Like if that was your, and then what happens if you're getting beat up? You know, it's a really strange way to live or making a living. So I was really fascinated by that. And then the other thing was this Clinton County, that area of northern New York has lots of public assistance because the economy's cratered, the military base closed down, people need help. And when I was there, I was able to interview and talk to some social assistance workers and talk to them about what it was like to go into these very impoverished communities and try to help people and things like that. I found that fascinating as well, so I wanted to get a character in there like that. So, you know, all the characters kind of emerged at different points, but it really started off with Kaiser, and he is kind of the center of the book, mostly. But that was the tricky part. It was like the complex plotting of getting everybody together. But that's what, you know, Sherwood Anderson does that. People, you know, this is, you know, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter by Carson McCullers is another great example for me, like as far as structurally. If you all read that, it's the same structure. All my books are The Heart is a Lonely Hunter, basically. You know, it's the same kind of structure. I'm trying because I love that way that's put together.
So I think, you know, what I'm hearing from Matt is that his obsessions, he just takes his obsessions and mixes them together and creates this.
Yeah.
So the art, the satellites, the hockey, it's all there.
Yeah.
It's all there.
No,
which
that's
is a
really
good
what it
lesson
is.
for all the writers, the young writers in the audience.
Yeah. You can take an obsession or a thing and then just inhabit it in a character. Like I was, you know, really interested in these paintings by Turner, and so I was like, okay, well, what it would be like to study that, to be that your whole life, and to know a lot about it. And so that allows me the excuse to research it, to look at a bunch of paintings, to research the life of Turner, and, you know, become a somewhat armchair expert of it myself, and then build a character on that. That's a lot of fun.
How did you do the ecstasy research?
There are not any children in here, are there? Yeah, you know, it you know, I heard it, a guy told me one time. No, I mean, it was yeah. This is being recorded, man. Like my dad might watch this. Yeah, well, you know, I'm aware of this stuff. And what I wanted to do, the ecstasy thing was, you know, like I said, it started from this idea of it gets transported over the border. But what I wanted was, well, what if there was like a special kind? You know, there's a little different special kind that was unique and like did something strange, did something off. It was, and so. It made people, and really it made people do things that they wouldn't normally do, even on ecstasy. It was sort of an unusual thing, because I needed to create the idea that there's a special desire or a need for this. You know, it can't just be regular ecstasy. So it had to be like a special thing, a dangerous thing. People die from this. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a guy who like goes out on the ice and falls through, and like he's frozen up to his waist. In the next morning, they find him like frozen. You know, like they do strange things. I think I'm fascinated by what creates the conditions to make us do strange things, and certainly weather and conditions, cultural, all that, and drugs, violence, any of those kinds of things, sex, any of those things that make us do things we wouldn't normally do is what's intriguing, because that's drama, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Curtis Wilkie sent me the nicest note about your book. He loves it. He says, Curtis Wilkie, if you don't know, is a living American treasure who's about half a mile
Wait,
from
Curtis
here.
Wilkie read my book?
Bill Cusimano out there, Bill Hay. Bill gave him an advanced reader's copy, and he read it, and he said,
holy shit.
He said, I can't do Curtis's accent. I've never heard anybody do dread so well.
Dread.
He loves your dread.
There's lots of dread. There's lots of dread.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a dark place, and I was fascinated by, we were talking about this, I see Chris back there, we were talking about this in his dissertation defense just the other day, I mean his PhD oral defense. One of the things I'm fascinated is this concept of the sublime, you know, and how the sublime is attached to things that are awesome and terrifying in aspect. And there are some people that believe, like Edmund Burke and some other philosophers, writers, and Ruskin, that talk about how for anything to be truly beautiful, it must have some aspect of the terrifying in it. And to me, that kind of sums up the North Country. It's an you know, you have the Adirondacks, you have this huge lake, you have this weather and all these things, and it's awesome and terrifying. And I think that makes it really beautiful. And so, what if you're a collector of these paintings, or you're searching for what is beautiful? Hopefully, that's what I think all the characters are doing. I think in the end, they're trying to find what they feel truly is beautiful. Kaiser's very mystified by this, and there's a scene where he you know, Leclerc asks him, like, you know, what do you think is really beautiful? He doesn't know what to think about that, but then later on he thinks he was reminded of it, and he takes the Emerson, the college student, and he shows her this satellite intersection they lay on the court square, on the lawn of the court square. Like, satellite intersection it's a situation where satellites seem to kind of intersect in the sky. Now, they're at different orbital elevations, so they're not colliding, but it's bizarre to see, because to him that's what's beautiful, you know. That's so. Yeah, it really is very much about beauty, the aesthetics, you know, as we understand it, what we think is truly beautiful, and then how the awesome or terrifying or dangerous things are always lurking in there, you know, a bit. I think I kind of agree with that. I think that in order for anything to be truly, really beautiful, there has to be some aspect of.
And what I didn't say in my introduction, you know, it is my favorite kind of book, a literary thriller, which I think I said, with, you know, with a great plot and incredible characters, but also language. Yeah. That's what separates it from, we'll say, non-literary writers. Great sentences, great insights into the characters, a lot of psychological work. A lot of psychological territory is occupied in this book, and often it's not. That's something that I don't do well, is psychology so much. So I admire when writers do that well. Will you read a little bit for us?
Yeah, sure. I'll just read a little section from the front. It's just a couple minutes. Well, it's the very front. The first page. The book has this complex plotting. So if I was going to read anything in the middle, it would require me 5 minutes. Yeah, and I don't like doing that if I can. So we'll just start at page 1 and just do the first couple pages. Two children of the North Country up before dawn. Their spoons clinked in unison as they ate cereal in the kitchen. Upstairs, their parents and older brother are swaddled in heavy blankets, the windows black and rimmed with frost. In the mudroom, Kaiser gathered jackets, pants, gloves, and hats, whispered instructions, worked buttons and zippers, tied laces. His little sister, weak with sleep, slumped against the wall in her down parka. Kaiser pulled the runner sled across the soybean field, creating fresh tracks on the unblemished snow. The sun was obscured by a scrim of gossamer clouds, the frozen surface of Lake Champlain glistening like the inside of an oyster shell. He bumped the sled onto the ice, and they headed northeast around the curve of Stony Point toward Kelly Bay, ahead Fort Montgomery, the international border, and the white plains of Quebec. Children of the North Country are not afraid of the frozen lake. A familiarity and ease with ice was instinctual, necessary. At the age of 7, Kaiser already knew the foot feel of strong ice, the way weak ice moved and buckled. He was familiar with the myriad of ice sounds, the squeak of frost bubbles, the crack of a fissure developing, the low rumble of shifting plates. Near the border, Kaiser dropped the rope and rested before turning back. He could hear the faint metallic grind of the train coming up the coast from Cooperville, the sound of diesel engines, a car door slamming, a beleaguered dog barking in the morning light. His parents would be awake soon. Then he saw it coming from a long way off, a blot on the Quebec side of the border, an immense dark shape sliding under the ice. He thought it was the shadow of an airplane, but as it moved closer, he could see the ice welling upward, rippling across the blunt leading edge. The bulging shape was several hundred feet long, angling toward them as if it knew they were there. Kaiser's body went rigid with incomprehension and fear. There was no time to run and nowhere to go. He looked back at his little sister, sitting cross-legged on the sled, scarf wrapped across her face, just her eyes showing. He could tell that she was smiling. Then it was under them. The ice rose up, and Kaiser fell to his hands and knees, the next moment dropping, and the sensation of weightlessness and the crashing of breaking ice and the shock of cold water on his skin. He was underwater in a thick soup of drifting dark and light shapes, a raging torrent of sound filling his ears, the pores of his skin dilating as the icy water burrowed into him. He clawed his way to the surface, struggling in the dark water filled with slush and angular shards of ice, his arms clumsy in his heavy coat. He got his forearms up over the edge of the hole, levering up his torso, sliding his legs out sideways, and then he was lying on the ice, gasping for breath. Everything was white and spangled with refracted light, the water on his eyelashes freezing as he rolled over onto his stomach, his pants and jacket already stiffening. His face was close against the ice, and through the mottled and warped prism he saw her, eyes wide open, her scarf fallen free from her face, her mouth open in an expression of incomprehension, two white palms pressed against the bottom of the ice, just inches away from his own hands. Everything focused into a singular keening sound, a high-pitched scream that seemed to explode from his body into the sky. There was a flurry of confusion, the clatter of broken ice, sloshing water, then a blank darkness settling over him. He ran a high fever for 2 weeks. At night, Kaiser would wake and find his father upright in the chair by the bed, eyes shut tight, grimacing, the wind humming outside the window. He was tormented by dreams of his sister, transfixed and silent under the pale sheen of ice, her hands pawing at the translucent wall between them. Daylight was like being buried alive, everything pressed in on him, filling his head so he couldn't parse out a single specific thought. They never recovered her body. Kaiser never told anyone about the shadow under the ice. Then one morning he joined his parents at the breakfast table. His father, who everyone called Kodiak, came up from the barn, stamping the snow off his boots into the doorway. When he saw the boy at the table, he smiled, a sort of deliberate, grinding smile. The morning was bright, the sun through the window, illuminating the table like a bonfire, and his mother watched him and his father eating with quiet, rapid motions. Kaiser didn't know yet that he would never step on the ice again. He didn't know that a part of him was lost.
Thank you.
Stop there. By the way, that section was in an earlier draft, was later on in the book, you know, and that's the scene that my wife, when she read it, she put it down, and she's like, "I'm not reading any more of this." It's troubling. It's troubling,
yeah,
you know, for people with children. And so for some reason, I decided to move it to the very front, so it would stop people immediately from reading this book further. But you know, it's a childhood incident, and we go forward in time from there. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the audience? Jeremy.
So what's different about the writing process for this book compared to other books?
The question is, what's different about the writing process of this book compared to other books?
For me, it wasn't that different, other than the length of time. It's all of my books are heavily informed by research and heavily informed by experiences that I've had, places I've lived, places I've seen. I tend to be if I'm going to write about something, I need to be in the spaces. I want to be there and around it and all that stuff. So the process was pretty similar. It was just that it was so very long. The early version of this book that nobody liked was just more complicated and confusing, and just so much going on, and so I had to kind of level things out a bit. So that would be a difference, is that I had to work a lot harder in this book to kind of control it and settle it down, make it more clear. The agents writing me back like, this is too confusing. You know, there's too much happening here. I was, I was feeling when I started this book, I was coming off of my third book, which I felt very good about, The Night Swimmer. We had that movie come out, all those things. I was really feeling ascendant, as they say, and I wanted to do my big book, like my complicated book, my real literary novel, just straight up, just something really interesting. And so I was feeling bold and confident, and so I had to pull back from that. I had to pull back from that, and I had to kind of level it out and cool things down, make things a bit more clear. There's a lot of plotting in this book. This is the most intricately plotted thing I've ever done, certainly. So that was difficult. So there's a lot of outline and notes and charts and stuff like that. So there was some of that, but it's really strange because it was such a long period of time. I lived with the book for a long time.
Good question. Another question? Yes, sir. Yes.
You said you spent a lot of time on the revision process. How did you go about this? What is the revision process?
The revision process my revision process is probably pretty basic. There's a couple methods. One, obviously, I'm reading through things on the screen. When I usually start the day, I'll go back and I'll read over what I did yesterday or last time. And then at some point, I'm going to print that out. At some point, I'm going to print the whole thing out and I'm going to read it out loud to myself, which is excruciating, horrible thing to do. It's so embarrassing. It's humiliating because it's so many bad things. Because when you can't hear when you read it out loud, you hear it so much differently than you're just reading it. Because in your mind translates it into what you think it is, or what it's supposed to, or what you think it's supposed to be. And sometimes you have to have it just spoken aloud. And so you say it out loud, and I'll go through and make notes, and then I'll take those notes and then apply it to the. So really, it's about trying to find different ways to look at the text, and also ways that get me out of it. So I'll have readers. I have some generous readers, friends, colleagues, people I went to grad school with. I'll send it to them. They send me notes. I'll go through those notes. Anything that I can get it away from me, because just revising by looking at the screen at the stuff you've already just done, I don't think that's really sufficient. So I think that sort of moving through those combinations. There are certainly some days where all I did was revise. Some days you come in and you're like, I got nothing. I got no good ideas. I can't write a sentence. Okay, well let's look at what we have. Let's review. Let's revise. Revision is always there. It's always possible. That's the one thing. But it is also the thing that causes a lot of writers to quit. I think people don't like it. It's hard. I think as a writer you have to develop a fondness for it even. I like it because it gives me something to do. If I can't come up with anything new, I'm like, okay, at least I can revise. But my suggestion is try to find different ways to get it away from you, outside of yourself, hear it out loud, get it in different formats, put it on paper, listen to it. If you ever listen to audio, read your own thing into a microphone and listen to it. I've tried that. It's really hard. I can't do it. It's really hard. But that's stuff like that I think is the best method, because I will certainly read. The remarkable thing is that I've been working on this book for 12 years, and you'll read a book and you'll revise it over and over again, Tom, and you know this, and your editor will read, your agent, everybody reads it, they go through it, you have all this stuff, and then you'll go do a reading, much like this one, and then you're reading a sentence and you're like, why the hell did I write? That's a terrible sentence. Like, how did I not catch?
Yeah, why didn't someone else catch it too?
Yeah, why didn't somebody else catch it? And how did I not catch it?
Yeah.
Which is just to say that I think it never ends. Really, it never. I mean, for me, I think some people might be able to say no, done. But for me, the book is never over. Like I could keep working on it. It's just at some point either I'm so sick of it, or everybody else is sick of it, or I need the money or something. I don't know. It's like the book has to get out. But for me, it's never over. It's never satisfied. It's never right. I mean, if I read a couple more pages, I would be more irritated by the mistakes that I've made. There was a line or two in what I just read that I'm just like, why didn't I change that? And I don't know the answer. It's amazing how you can go over it over and again.
One of my favorite stories is Richard Ford read Canada. This is a long novel, to his wife 3 times. She sat there and listened to it 3 times.
Oh my God.
And they're still married.
That's terrible, yeah.
Yeah, so Stacy, did he read this to you?
No, she would not stand for it. No way. But Stacey does read them and gives me very insightful feedback. So yeah, getting people to read it is a big deal.
Yeah.
You know, especially if you get another writer to read it, somebody that's at least trying to write or something. I think it's a good idea too. But revision is everything. It's huge. It's huge. Yeah.
Another question. Sheila.
First of all, that was so good. I didn't want you to stop reading.
Thank you.
Was wonderful. It was
Thanks.
wonderful. I was thinking about your what you said about research and how your passions are. They drive the novel, they inform the novel, they shape the novel. But you also have these characters that are clearly so well defined that it's like they don't feel like products of or extensions of your brain or your passions.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go from the research to creating these completely distinct people?
Yeah.
The question is, how does Matt go from research to creating distinct humans from that research?
Yeah, well, you know, the characters, they come out of the research to some degree, but also they are in part based on people I know, you know, that I met or, you know, have interacted with in some way. It's usually some combination of characters or people that I've met or something like that, combined with the research. So it's sort of a variety of different methods in that way. But really it comes from living with them enough. You know, you live with the character long enough, they start to become real for you in ways that is very strange. You know, it's very strange how emotional I can get about these characters in a novel. And it's just because I've lived them so long. And they keep evolving. You know, it's like they weren't the same 10 years ago as they are now, so they evolve in some way. I like to take aspects of individuals that I meet, you know, and then create combinations, and then I attach them to some kind of, hopefully some idea or passion or something else. And that puts them in motion, you know, that gives them something to do. I think that's about it. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. When you start, you know, it's one of these essential questions. Me, I'm almost always, I begin with some kind of image for whether it's a story, a novel, or character, or anything else. You know, there's some, like when I did The Night Swimmer, this novel about open water swimming, where, you know, I had this image of this woman walking out of the water in Ireland, you know, and that was the main character, and then just, I don't know, you know, I don't know where that came from or why. I guess I maybe was just thinking about that. And so I think when I'm thinking about paintings, I was thinking about the paintings of Turner, and I was like, what would it be like to study that for your job, for a living, you know, much in the way that, you know, as academics, like we do things. How fascinating would it be? And then what if you were in northern New York, you know, and you're in this place where you couldn't even see any of this stuff. How hard would that be? And then the character starts to emerge from there, you know. I don't know. Yeah, that's a tough question, Sheila. I feel like I'm not giving a very good answer.
No, that's great.
That's kind of all I got. Yeah, it's a good question.
Another question? One of my undergraduates? Come on, people.
None of my students have any questions? No pressure. Just kidding. You don't have to ask any questions. Oh, Joe.
I have a question because I think the story of the novel is interesting, where it kind of, you had this failure, but you didn't accept it.
Yeah.
And I was wondering about the revision process, if
Yeah.
it was more, to what extent it was market influence, like I want to write a book that will sell, and how much of it was like a personal, like, I really believe in this novel, I don't want to abandon it, or was it some kind of mix of the two?
That's a very good question, Joe.
Yeah,
You're
I'll try to summarize the question. You summarize that one.
Well, he was asking about the market considerations. Like, if the thing
Yeah.
failed, you know, when I'm revising it, am I thinking, oh, how can I make this so it will sell? And the answer to that is, you know, yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm doing that to some degree, but I'm trying to balance that against the original impetus or idea, the main goals of it, and I'm trying. So yes, and the revision was a lot about simplifying and taking away things and kind of stretching things out and kind of making it more palatable in some way. But I tried to do it that's in a way that still honored the real things I wanted to do. You know, it's tricky. I feel like I feel comfortable with it. I feel that I didn't sacrifice anything major. It's still a complicated, weird, messed up book in many ways. I could have done it much more straight thriller-wise. You know what I mean? Like, when we say literary thriller, we're talking about usually the language is one thing, but and also just more complexity or something like that. I just didn't. I don't even know how to do that. I think I write a more straight thriller or something like that that would sell. Like, because Joe, could I just write a thriller that would sell immediately and do very well? And I think the answer is no right now. I just don't know really how to do it. And my instincts are towards this other thing, and you have to trust that, I think, to some degree. And it's worked out okay so far. Like, I keep being able to publish things. So I'm trying to stick to it. Now, there could be a time, though, writers, this happens to plenty of writers, that you reach a point in your career where you kind of have to shift. You have to change in order to keep publishing and stay relevant, maybe, or just even to keep your career going. Believe me, I get it, and I'm maybe that's happening or will happen to me, but I feel fortunate that I was able to kind of retain the things that really mattered to me. In the end, Joe, I think I was able to kind of revise it greatly, but still feel like it's still the same book. It still has the same heart to it. It still has the same important elements of it. And those elements are going to be the things that readers like the least, probably. And that's okay. You know what I mean? Like, you have to, at some point, the agent will tell you, the editors will tell you, like, you could get rid of this and it will be a better book, which they mean sell. It'll sell better. And there are definitely times where I was like, no. 5 perspectives. Like, why don't you take out, you could take out, like, they wanted me to get rid of the art historian character and the Sue Jansky stuff, all that, just take that all together. Mm-hmm. I was like, there's no way. I cannot. I fought them on that. I was like, no, they're integral to the whole thing, and without them, I'd rather it not be published. I'd rather it not be published. So you kind of have to hang on to that. But I'm very, very fortunate, very lucky that I've had previous success. I've had other things that enabled me to be in this. I wouldn't say that's necessarily. I wouldn't speak for everyone else. I get why people do that and change and have to adapt. I mean, it's part of our profession. A lot of people do that, right? I think.
Okay, I think that's good for tonight. Thank you all for coming. And Matt's going to sign books, aren't you?
Yes, I am. I'll be sitting up here. Thanks so much, everybody, for coming. Appreciate it.